Dad's silent revenge.
I buried my wife 8 months ago. Yesterday, I found her alive at Builder's Supply on North Main Street, arguing about lumber prices like she'd been doing it her whole life. My name is Harold Mitchell. I'm 59, and I thought I knew what betrayal looked like. I was wrong. Dorothy and I had been married for 25 years. I built Mitchell Construction from nothing, started with a pickup truck and a toolbox in 1989, turned it into a $3.2 million operation with 47 employees across 3 counties. Dorothy managed the office side of things, handled the books, knew every contract we'd ever signed. When she died in that car accident on Highway 94 last February, I thought my world had ended. The funeral was packed. Half the construction industry showed up to pay respects. Dorothy had been the face of our company for years, the one who smoothed over disputes with suppliers, who remembered every contractor's birthday. I stood there in my black suit, accepting condolences, while our son Victor held my arm like I might collapse. Dad's taking it real hard, Victor kept telling people. He should know he'd been working as our accountant for 6 years, fresh out of college with his business degree. Smart kid, too smart as it turned out. The months after the funeral were rough. I threw myself into work, but everything reminded me of Dorothy. Her coffee cup still sat on her desk. Her handwriting was all over the project files. Victor kept offering to help with the paperwork, said I shouldn't have to deal with all those details while I was grieving. I let him handle most of it. Big mistake. Yesterday started like any other Tuesday in October. I needed materials for the Patterson job, a custom home we were wrapping up on Elm Creek Drive. The usual lumber yard was backed up until Thursday, so I drove over to Builder's Supply on the north side of town. Place I'd never been to before, kind of run down with cracked asphalt and faded signs, but they had what I needed in stock. The yard was busy for a Tuesday afternoon. Contractors loading trucks, forklift operators moving pallets of concrete blocks. The usual chaos of a working lumber yard. I was loading 2.8s into my truck when I heard it, that voice. Not loud, not calling my name, just complaining about prices in that specific way Dorothy always did when she thought someone was trying to rip us off. $15 for a 2x4, that's highway robbery. I can get the same grade lumber at Home Depot for $12. My hand stopped moving. I turned around slowly, and there she was. Same auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail. Same way of standing with one hip cocked when she was annoyed. Same small scar on her chin from when she fell off her bike as a kid, a mark I'd kissed 1,000 times over the years. Dorothy, my dead wife, very much alive. She was talking to the yard manager near the main counter, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt I'd never seen before, but it was definitely her. The way she gestured with her hands when making a point, the slight tilt of her head when she was thinking. Details you can't fake when you've lived with someone for 25 years. I dropped the lumber. 3 8-foot boards clattered to the concrete, loud enough that people turned to look, including her. Our eyes met for maybe 3 seconds. I saw recognition flash across her face, then panic, then something that looked like guilt. She turned and walked fast toward the parking lot. Dorothy, I shouted, following her through the maze of lumber stacks and concrete barriers. Dorothy, wait. She stopped near a blue Honda sedan I'd never seen before, took a deep breath, and turned around. When she looked at me, her face was calm, composed, like she was talking to a stranger who'd confused her with someone else. I'm sorry, she said. Her voice steady but slightly higher than normal. I think you have me confused with someone else. My name is Diana Walsh. Diana Walsh. I stared at her, 25 years of marriage, and she was standing there telling me her name was Diana Walsh. No, I said, stepping closer. You're Dorothy Mitchell. You're my wife. We've been married for 25 years. You died 8 months ago in a car accident on Highway 94. She shook her head, backing toward the car. Sir, I think you're going through something very difficult. You should probably talk to someone about this. Grief can make people see things that aren't there. The way she said grief, like she was reading from a psychology textbook. Dorothy never talked like that, but everything else about her was exactly right. The freckles on her nose, the way her left eyebrow was slightly higher than the right. The small gap between her front teeth that she was self-conscious about. Show me your hands, I said suddenly. She frowned. What, your hands? Show me your hands. She hesitated, then held them up. There it was, minus the crescent-shaped scar on her right palm from when she cut herself opening a can of paint 12 years ago. I'd driven her to the emergency room for 8 stitches. We'd laughed about it later, how she'd managed to injure herself doing something she'd done hundreds of times. I have to go now, she said quickly, already opening the car door. I truly hope you find the help you need. Then she got in that Honda and drove away. I stood there in the Builder's Supply parking lot, watching my dead wife disappear around the corner onto Maple Street. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my truck for maybe an hour, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Either I was losing my mind, or Dorothy was alive and had somehow faked her own death. Neither option made much sense, but I'm an engineer by training. I know how to solve problems systematically. I started with what I knew for certain. That was definitely Dorothy. Same voice, same mannerisms, same way of moving. The scar on her chin that she got when she was 12. The scar on her hand from the paint can incident. You can't fake that stuff. So if Dorothy was alive, then who had we buried? And why would she fake her death? I drove home to our house on Birch Lane, the one we'd bought 15 years ago when the business really took off. Sat in the driveway for a few minutes, looking at the place we'd shared for so long. Dorothy's flower garden was overgrown now. I tried to keep it up after the funeral, but I didn't have her touch with plants inside. I went straight to my office and started pulling files. Insurance policies, bank statements, business records, everything from the months leading up to Dorothy's accident. I'd let Victor handle most of this stuff while I was grieving, but now I wanted to see it all myself. The life insurance payout had been $750,000, paid out 6 weeks after the funeral. The death certificate was signed by Dr. Richards at County General. Everything looked legitimate on the surface. But then I started noticing things that didn't add up. Business account transfers I didn't remember authorizing. Equipment sales that seemed low for what we'd actually sold. Payments to vendors I'd never heard of. Small stuff, but when you've been running a business for 30 years, you develop an instinct for what looks right and what doesn't. Over the past 18 months, maybe $400,000 had moved through accounts in ways that didn't make complete sense. Nothing dramatic enough to catch my attention while I was grieving, but now that I was looking for problems, they were everywhere. I called my lawyer the next morning. Beverly Chen had handled our business contracts for years, sharp as a tack, didn't waste time on small talk. Her office was in the Riverside Professional Building downtown, 15th floor with a view of the river. "Bev," I said, settling into the chair across from her mahogany desk, "I need you to walk me through something, and I need you to keep it confidential for now." "Of course. What's going on, Harold? If someone wanted to fake their death and steal money from their spouse, how would they do it?" Long pause. Beverly set down her coffee cup and looked at me with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "That's a very specific question. Are you in some kind of trouble?" I told her about seeing Dorothy at the lumber yard, about the financial irregularities I'd found, about the way Dorothy had looked at me, recognition then panic. Beverly listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I've always liked about her. "Harold," she said finally, "if what you're telling me is true, we're talking about insurance fraud, identity theft, and financial crimes. This isn't just a divorce case. This is felony territory. What do I need to prove it? Evidence, documentation, proof of identity fraud and financial transfers, and probably a good private investigator." Beverly recommended a guy named Larry Hoffman, retired police detective specialized in financial crimes. I met him that afternoon at Murphy's Diner off I-275, one of those places with worn vinyl booths and coffee that could strip paint. He was older than me, maybe 65, gray hair, and careful eyes that missed nothing. "Your lawyer filled me in," he said over coffee and apple pie that reminded me of Dorothy's baking. "This is either a very elaborate delusion or your wife pulled off something pretty sophisticated. Let's find out which." Larry explained how these things usually work. Fake death scams require fake bodies, fake medical records, fake accident reports, lots of moving parts. "The good news," he said, cutting another bite of pie, "is that lots of moving parts mean lots of places where people make mistakes. How long will it take? Give me 2 weeks. I'll need access to your financial records, and I'll need that license plate number if you can get it." Getting the license plate meant going back to Builder Supply and waiting. I felt ridiculous, sitting in my truck like some kind of stalker, but I needed answers. The place was busiest in the mornings, contractors picking up supplies before heading to job sites. I parked across the street with a clear view of the entrance. On the third day, the blue Honda showed up again around 10:30 a.m. Dorothy got out, wearing different clothes but moving with that same confident stride I'd watched for 25 years. She went inside for maybe 20 minutes, came out with a receipt but no materials. I wrote down the license plate number, Ohio tags HBD 7429 and followed at a distance as she pulled onto Maple Street. Stayed back far enough not to be obvious, but close enough not to lose her in traffic. She drove to a neighborhood I didn't recognize, about 20 minutes from downtown. Modest houses built in the 70s and 80s, older trees, front porches with American flags. The kind of place where people knew their neighbors and kids rode bikes in the street. She pulled into the driveway of a small ranch house with white siding and a green front door, well-maintained lawn, flower boxes under the windows. A man came out of the house when she parked, tall guy, maybe 48, dark hair going gray at the temples. He kissed her cheek like they'd been married for years, the kind of casual affection that comes from long habit. Then 2 kids ran out, maybe 8 and 10, calling her mom and asking what she'd brought them from town. I sat there watching my wife, my supposedly dead wife, living a completely different life with a completely different family. The man helped her carry groceries inside. Normal family stuff, raking leaves in the yard, kids playing catch, like the last 25 years with me had never happened. The mailbox said Thompson in neat black letters. Larry called me a week later. "Harold, you need to come to my office. We need to talk." His office was in a strip mall between a tax preparation service and a dry cleaner. Nothing fancy, but organized and professional. The folder he handed me was thick, filled with bank records, property transfers, medical documents, background checks. "Your wife has been living a double life for at least 6 years," Larry said, leaning back in his chair. "The man she's living with is Gerald Thompson. Divorced, works as a supervisor at Commonwealth Electric. The kids are his from his first marriage. She's been using the name Diana Walsh, has a driver's license and social security number under that identity. How is that possible? Birth certificate fraud. There was a real Diana Walsh who died as an infant in 1970. Your wife somehow got hold of that identity and built a whole new life around it." Larry spread out financial documents across his desk like he was dealing cards. "She's been systematically moving money out of your business accounts for 18 months. Small amounts, spread out over time, transferred to accounts under the Walsh identity. Total so far looks like about $640,000. My stomach dropped. $600,000? Equipment sales where the proceeds went to the wrong accounts. Vendor payments to companies that don't exist. Expense reimbursements for trips she never took. She's been very careful, very methodical. The accident report was fake too. The body in the car had been a homeless woman named Sarah Kellerman who died of natural causes at County General, no family to ask questions. Dorothy had somehow arranged for the body to be burned beyond recognition in the crash, then identified through dental records that had been switched. Your son Victor was involved," Larry said quietly. "The financial transfers required his authorization as your company accountant. Phone records show 47 calls between them in the month before the accident, another 23 calls since the funeral. That hit me harder than anything else. Victor. The kid I'd raised since he was 6 years old when I married Dorothy. I'd put him through college, brought him into the business, trusted him with everything. What do I do now?" I asked. "That depends on what you want. This is criminal behavior, insurance fraud, identity theft, embezzlement. We can turn this over to the district attorney and let them handle it. Or you can try to handle it privately and just try to get your money back." I thought about it for maybe 10 seconds. "I want them prosecuted. Both of them." Beverly filed the complaint with the DA's office the next day. By that afternoon, warrants had been issued for Dorothy Mitchell, aka Diana Walsh, and Victor Mitchell. The charges included insurance fraud, identity theft, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The police picked up Victor at the office on Thursday morning. I wasn't there when it happened, but my foreman Jerry called me around 10 a.m. "Harold, they just arrested Victor. Had him in handcuffs and everything. What the hell is going on?" I drove over to the county jail that evening. The place smelled like disinfectant and despair, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Victor was being held pending bail hearing. We sat across from each other in the visiting room, separated by reinforced glass, talking through phones that crackled with static. "Dad," he said, and his voice sounded like he was 12 years old again. "I can explain everything. Go ahead." "Mom said you were going to divorce her. She said you'd already talked to lawyers about it, that you were going to take the business and leave her with nothing. I hadn't talked to any divorce lawyers. Dorothy and I had our problems like any married couple, but I'd never considered leaving her. But I didn't interrupt. She said if she just disappeared, it would be easier for everyone. You'd get the insurance money, I'd inherit the business eventually, and she could start over somewhere else. And you believed that." Victor looked down at his hands. The same hands I'd taught to swing a hammer when he was 16, working construction jobs during summer break. "I didn't want to see you guys fight through a divorce. I thought maybe it would be better this way." "Better for who, Victor? You embezzled $640,000 from our company. You helped your mother fake her death. You let me grieve for someone who wasn't even dead. I know it was wrong, but I thought if enough time passed, everyone would be okay with how things worked out." I hung up the phone without saying goodbye. The next morning, I drove back to Gerald Thompson's house on Sycamore Street. This time, I didn't hide behind trees or park down the block. I pulled right into the driveway and walked up to the front door like I belonged there. Gerald answered when I rang the bell. He was wearing work clothes, probably getting ready to head to his job at the electric company. When he saw me, his face went pale. "You must be Harold," he said. He looked tired, like he'd been expecting this conversation. "Where is she?" "Gone. Left yesterday after the police came by asking questions." He stepped aside. "You want to come in? I think maybe we both got played here." Gerald's living room was neat, comfortable, kids' toys in the corner, family pictures on the mantle, pictures that included my wife as Diana, smiling like she belonged there, arms around children who weren't mine. "How long have you known her?" I asked, settling onto his couch. 3 years. Met her at a church social at St. Matthew's over on Elm Street. She said she was widowed, had moved here from Michigan to start over. Seemed like a good woman trying to rebuild her life. Did she ever mention me, or Victor, or Mitchell Construction? Gerald shook his head. Never. Said her husband died of cancer, that she didn't like to talk about it because it was too painful. I respected that. Lost my first wife to breast cancer 8 years ago, so I understood. She's been married to me for 25 years. We own a construction company worth over $3 million. She faked her death 8 months ago and stole over $600,000 from our business accounts. Gerald sat down heavily on his recliner, like someone had punched him in the stomach. Jesus, the kids, they love her. They've been asking when Mom Diana is coming home. I felt sorry for him, for the kids. They were victims in this too, just like me. Did you notice anything strange about her? Anything that didn't add up? She always paid cash for everything. Said she didn't trust banks after her husband's medical bills wiped out their savings, and she never wanted to travel anywhere, never wanted to meet my extended family. Said she was too shy, too set in her ways. Made perfect sense. Dorothy had been covering her tracks, keeping her two lives separate. Cash transactions left no paper trail. Avoiding family gatherings meant fewer people who might ask awkward questions. She got a phone call about 2 weeks ago. Gerald continued. Afterwards, she was different. Nervous, jumpy. Started talking about maybe taking a vacation, going somewhere warm for the winter. That would be when my investigator started asking questions around town. Gerald nodded. Harold, I'm sorry, I had no idea. If I'd known she was married, had a family, you couldn't have known. She fooled everyone. The police found her 3 days later at a bus station in Atlanta, trying to board a Greyhound to Miami with $47,000 in cash and a fake passport under yet another name, Rebecca Martinez. She was extradited back home and charged with 14 different felonies. I was there when they brought her into the courthouse for arraignment. She looked smaller somehow, older. The confident woman who'd managed my business for 25 years was gone, replaced by someone who looked scared and defeated. Our eyes met across the courtroom for a moment. I thought I saw the Dorothy I'd married, the woman who'd helped me build something from nothing. Then her lawyer whispered something in her ear and she looked away. Victor took a plea deal, pled guilty to embezzlement and conspiracy charges, got 4 years in state prison and an order to pay restitution. The business accounts were frozen and eventually returned to the company, minus legal fees and interest penalties. Dorothy went to trial. The prosecutor called it one of the most elaborate fraud schemes he'd seen in 20 years. I testified about the financial irregularities, about finding her at the lumber yard, about the impact on the business and on my life. The hardest part of testifying was staying calm. When the prosecutor asked me to describe the moment I found Dorothy at Builder's Supply, I had to pause and take a breath. 25 years of marriage, and it all came down to a stranger telling me my dead wife was alive and shopping for lumber. Dorothy's defense attorney tried to paint her as a victim of an abusive marriage, claimed she'd faked her death to escape domestic violence. Complete nonsense. We'd had our disagreements over the years, but I'd never laid a hand on her, never even raised my voice much. The prosecutor demolished that argument with testimony from friends, neighbors, employees who'd worked with us for years. The financial evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, forged signatures, asset transfers, insurance fraud. Dorothy's lawyer tried to claim she was mentally unstable, suffering from some kind of breakdown, but the systematic nature of the theft told a different story. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was calculated, methodical, planned over years. She got 12 years, won't be eligible for parole until she's 66. I kept the business running, though it took a while to rebuild trust with clients and suppliers. Word gets around fast in construction. People were understanding mostly. Nobody blamed me for what Dorothy and Victor did, but it was embarrassing. I felt like an idiot for not seeing it coming. The life insurance company sued to recover the $750,000 payout, plus interest and penalties. That case dragged on for 8 months, but eventually we settled. I had to pay back $680,000, which hurt but didn't break the company. Beverly negotiated it down from the full amount by arguing that I was a victim of fraud too. Gerald Thompson stopped by the office about 6 months after everything settled, wanted to apologize, said he felt terrible about the whole situation. Good man, Turns out he'd been divorced for 4 years when he met Dorothy, raising his kids mostly on his own, working overtime to pay child support to his ex-wife. "You want to know the worst part?" he said. "Sitting across from my desk where Dorothy used to handle the books. I really thought I'd found someone to spend the rest of my life with. Thought I'd gotten lucky for the first time in years. I understood that feeling. The kids keep asking about Mom Diana," he continued. "They don't understand why she just disappeared. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that the woman they thought was their stepmother was actually a criminal living under a fake name?" I didn't have an answer for that. Some damage can't be undone, some trust can't be rebuilt. Gerald and his kids were victims too, just different ones. It's been 18 months now since I found Dorothy at that lumber yard. The business is doing well, better than before in some ways. I hired a new office manager, a woman named Ruth Patterson, who's honest as the day is long and twice as organized as Dorothy ever was. Ruth instituted new procedures, better oversight of the books, separation of duties so no one person can move money around without multiple approvals. I've got new security cameras in the office, new locks on the file cabinets, new protocols for equipment sales and vendor payments. Trust, but verify. That's my new motto. Victor writes me letters from prison sometimes, says he's sorry, says he wants to make things right when he gets out in 2 more years. I don't write back. Maybe someday I will, but not yet. Some betrayals cut too deep for quick forgiveness. He'll be 35 when he's released, old enough to start over somewhere else if he's learned anything from this mess. People ask me if I'm dating anyone, if I'm thinking about getting married again. Honestly, I don't know. It's hard to imagine trusting someone that much again after what Dorothy did, but I'm not ruling it out entirely. I'm 61 now, still got good years ahead of me. Maybe someone will come along who's worth taking that risk again. The funny thing is, I don't hate Dorothy anymore. I'm not angry like I was at first. Mostly, I feel sorry for her. She had a good life, a successful business, a husband who loved her despite her faults, and she threw it all away for what? To play house with someone else's kids. To start over with a fake identity in a smaller house with a man who made half what our business generated. I'll never understand the calculations that led her to think faking her death was better than just asking for a divorce. Sure, she would have gotten half of everything, but half of $3 and $2 million is still a pretty good settlement. Instead, she chose crime, chose deception, chose to hurt people who cared about her. But I don't need to understand it. I just need to move on. The business is strong. I've got loyal employees, good clients, a reputation that survived the scandal. Jerry, my foreman, has been with me for 19 years. Says he never trusted Dorothy anyway, thought she was too slick for her own good. Wish he'd mentioned that earlier, but hindsight's always clearer than foresight. I've got my health. My house paid off, enough money to retire comfortably when I'm ready. The company will probably go to Jerry when I step down. He's earned it, and he's got 2 sons who might want to carry on the Mitchell construction name even though they're not Mitchells by blood. These days, when people ask me about Dorothy, I tell them the truth. My wife faked her death, stole $640,000, and got 12 years in prison for it. Some people don't believe me at first. Sounds too crazy to be real, but it is real. It happened. And I survived it. That's something, I guess. Not the life I planned at 61, but it's the life I got. I wake up every morning in my own house, run my own business, make my own decisions without wondering what schemes might be happening behind my back. There's peace in that kind of honesty, even if it came at a high price. Mitchell Construction is still here, still building houses, still employing good people, still getting the job done right. Dorothy tried to destroy that, but she failed. The company is stronger now than it ever was when she was part of it. And so am I, not because I wanted to be, but because I had to be. Sometimes that's how strength works. It's not something you choose, it's something that chooses you when everything else falls apart. I learned that even after 25 years, you might not really know the person sleeping next to you. But I also learned that you can survive finding out. You can rebuild. You can trust again carefully with better boundaries and clearer eyes. The woman I thought I married never really existed. But the man I became after losing her, he's real, he's careful, he's stronger than he used to be, and he's got work to do. Trust isn't something you give blindly. It's something you build carefully, brick by brick, with eyes wide open and procedures in place to protect what matters most. The biggest betrayals don't come from strangers in dark alleys. They come from the people closest to you, which is why the strongest foundations are built on verification, not just faith.